All right, thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Martin Hayes. I am one of the application engineers here at Concepts in Production. And today we're going to look at some best practices in SOLIDWORKS for installation, performance, and troubleshooting. With SOLIDWORKS 2017 right around the corner, we know that there will be people doing installs throughout their organizations, and wanted to go ahead and just kind of get ahead of the game here and give you some of the best practices, some of the things to check, some boxes to check as you walk through installations and upgrades, as well as some tips and tricks for working with SOLIDWORKS performance and troubleshooting when you do have a problem and you need to get in touch with us with it, some of the best practices for going about that route and getting your problem addressed quickly. We'll start out looking at installations and upgrades, and if you've been a CAD admin or a SOLIDWORKS user for a while, you're probably used to this process. You'll receive a media kit in the mail, and maybe you use your DVD to install the latest service pack of the new version of the software. But if you want to get the software out early, or if you didn't receive a media kit for a certain service pack and you want to go straight to the customer portal and download it, you do have access with an active subscription to customerportal.solidworks.com. You can either go to the website for SOLIDWORKS and log in through the login link going to customer portal, or you can just type in customerportal.solidworks.com. First time you go in, you'll need to create a SOLIDWORKS ID. This is an account for mysolidworks.com, solidworks.com, and the customer portal. One login to control all those, and you use your serial number to create that SOLIDWORKS ID. Logging in here, this is your hub for, I mentioned the downloads and updates, but we'll also show you the links to the forums, the information for system requirements and hardware, as well as where you handle your service requests and enhancement requests. And there is a knowledge base here that you can also look up troubleshooting articles, solutions, and service requests that have been submitted by other users that SOLIDWORKS publishes for everyone to have on record. So that's a great asset. We use the knowledge base and the forums a lot for looking up best practices for SOLIDWORKS. In the customer portal, we do have access to those downloads and updates. And in the downloads section, under downloads and updates, you find each of the last several versions of the software, the changes that were made in that specific service pack. So SOLIDWORKS has begun listing the highlights of the changes in that service pack in a more readable format, and then they do have a link to the full change log for both this service pack as well as the previous service packs available online as well. At the bottom of the page, you do have access to each of the service packs for that year, and currently in 2016, PCB was just released and Visualize was all released. So these two products are actually separate downloads. So if you've got SOLIDWORKS Professional and you want to take a look at the rendering software Visualize, it is in a different download. These links right here at the top are going to be your main download for your installation manager. Once you go into that and accept the EULA, you will get prompted for downloading SOLIDWORKS Installation Manager. It's a real quick download, and then from within that tool, from within the Installation Manager, is where you're able to either download and install your product on the fly with only downloading the stuff that you actually need to install. Like if you don't have access to premium features or simulation features, it won't even worry about downloading that, or you can actually download the entire service pack, which would be pretty much a replication of what you would get in a media kit on a DVD. We're going to talk about the difference in those as well. If you get into your customer portal and there are padlocks by each of the links in the customer portal, you can go into Register My Product, and in the Register My Product screen, you have access. The link would just be down at the bottom. It's pretty much the only one that wouldn't have a padlock. You'll have access to input your serial number, and register the latest version of your software, and that will unlock the knowledge base links, the download links, everything that has the padlock on it. So that's a question we get a lot. Why am I not able to access the downloads online? And typically we can register the product. If you have any issues with that after you've tried to register your product, sometimes we'll have to give a call into SOLIDWORKS, and that's just their main phone number that's on their homepage website. You can either touch base with us and we can get in contact with them for you, or you can call them directly, and usually they can sort those issues out pretty quickly on their end. Now, once you've got the installation manager downloaded, there are a few best practices for the steps to take as you set up the install. The first screen you'll see when you get into the SOLIDWORKS installation manager gives you the options for an individual installation, which would be on a client computer, to create an administrative image for distributing to clients, installing server products for the Solid Network License Manager or the PDM server products, a couple of the other server products available there. And then the last option is one we like to point our customers to: download and share all files. And that's a great tool that you're able to use to go ahead and get the full, usually it's 9, 10, 11 gigs. It's a large download, but that full download is everything that would be on the media kit for that service pack. And what we encourage customers to do that have several clients is to download and share all files, take those files and put them on a network share or on a USB drive so that everyone can have access to them, and you're not having to do several gigabytes of downloads on every machine that you're installing SOLIDWORKS on. So that's a good practice there to start out with: download and share all files. Then you have the resources for that service pack. In the future, you can do modifications or repairs. If you add products or if you're having issues with the product, you can run a repair using that software. Now, when you launch setup.exe, when you launch the SOLIDWORKS installation manager for the install itself, we do recommend that you go into your antivirus software. Now, I've got AVG installed here, and use an option for temporarily disabling the antivirus. And this is going to drive your IT department crazy, but it does really help with making sure all the DLLs get registered as the software installs. And so setting that up for something like disabling the software until the next restart on the computer can help a lot with making sure that the elements of the installation go correctly. SOLIDWORKS does have on their website in the customer portal access to a list of approved, SOLIDWORKS certified and approved antivirus software. It includes many of the major softwares. The step of disabling the software can be ignored, but it typically, especially if you already have any issues with installations, go ahead and disable the antivirus, and the next step would be right-click and run as admin. So when you navigate to that setup exe in your SOLIDWORKS downloads folder, go ahead and right-click and run as admin. Even if you're logged in as an administrative user, this does give the software those administrative permissions that it needs to make the changes to the registry and to register and unregister the DLLs that it needs to make changes to. The last thing I wanted to address in the installation manager is when you're doing an upgrade from SOLIDWORKS 2015 to SOLIDWORKS 2016, or in a few months from SOLIDWORKS 2016 to SOLIDWORKS 2017, you will have the option to either do a clean new installation, and you can actually run 2017 alongside 2016 as your company makes that transition, or if you have customers that are still running 2016 or 2015, you can have both versions so that for those customers' files, you're able to create files that they can open in the backdated software. So the new installation option does give you the ability to install two different versions of SOLIDWORKS on the same machine using the same serial number with the same features. It also can address some issues that arise with an upgrade installation. So if you're doing an upgrade, a lot of times that is a quicker install to just make the changes to the files that already exist on your computer. But if you run into any problems with an upgraded installation, typically trying to do a new installation alongside the previous version can address some of those problems. Some warnings that you might run into in the SOLIDWORKS Installation Manager. In SOLIDWORKS 2015 SP4 and earlier, and this has been addressed, streamlined in 2015 SP5 in all versions of 2016, there was a Microsoft installer update, and this is kind of old news. It was last July last year, that Microsoft did an update in Windows for how the installer processes are handled. And there is, if you get this warning, if you're installing 2015 SP4 or earlier in 2015 or any of the versions earlier, 2014, 2013, you will get this warning as the system is checking your serial number. And there's a link at the bottom of that window that gives you instructions on how to bypass that Microsoft update that can cause your installation to fail. This is where that link points to on SOLIDWORKS website. The main thing is you're looking for the registry key that you need to edit to create this remapped elevated proxies policy DWORD value and turn it on with a value of 1. And then your installation can run, or if you've already had a failed installation, you can change this value in the registry and then go to repair in Windows control panel to repair your installation of SOLIDWORKS if you've run into an issue with that Microsoft Windows installer update. Now that has been addressed in SOLIDWORKS 2015 SP5 and then SOLIDWORKS 2016 SP0. We don't expect it to be an issue with SOLIDWORKS 2017 either, but it is something that people have had issues with over the last year or so, and I know a lot of companies might be running some of that older software. If you're on 2015, we strongly recommend go ahead and installing 2015 SP5 because it does have that fix as well as some other hot fixes integrated. Another warning that I wanted to bring to your attention, and I've just got the PDM icon here to remind me to talk about it, but if you have a PDM client installed, in 2016 they've adjusted the way that software is installed. They have included it in the main SOLIDWORKS Installation Manager, and so if you have a seat of SOLIDWORKS on a client with a PDM client installed, when you go to upgrade SOLIDWORKS to a newer service pack, say you're going from 2016 SP1 to 2016 the latest service pack SP4, you want to make sure that your PDM client stays on the same version and service pack that the PDM server is on. So if the IT department or the CAD admin has not upgraded the PDM server from SP1 to SP4 yet, you'll need to keep your PDM client on SP1, and it's okay to go ahead and upgrade the rest of SOLIDWORKS to SP4. Now that's done on the product selection screen, and you can go in and just deselect PDM client during the installation. That's something that we've ran into, that clients, users, as they're upgrading to a later version, a later service pack of SOLIDWORKS in the same major version, they inadvertently upgrade their PDM client and they lose connection to the PDM server because it's on a different service pack. A little preview, we're not advertising much about 2017 yet, but they're looking at making some adjustments to that in the future, and that might not be something we have to worry about so much in the future. But just wanted to bring that to attention. You will get a warning if you're installing 2015 SP4 earlier. No matter what, you'll get this warning. If you've made the change, you just go ahead and push OK and continue. And if you have a PDM client, no matter what, even if it's not an issue, you will get a notification just kind of reminding you, make sure your PDM client is on the same version and service pack as your PDM server. Now moving into the performance section, we get questions a lot. What's the best hardware for me to run? What performance modifications can I make to settings on my computer How can I get SOLIDWORKS to run smoother or faster or address performance issues that I'm having? So the first thing to know is that each version of SOLIDWORKS has different requirements to what Windows versions it can run on. We mentioned SOLIDWORKS 2015 SP5 as being the recommended 2015 installation. Another reason for that is because that's when they began support for Windows 10. So if you're running Windows 10, every version of 2016 is great for you, but you want to make sure that if you're on 2015 on Windows 10, you're installing SP5, and SOLIDWORKS 2014 is not actually supported on Windows 10. You can see the rest of the list there where we began support for Windows 8.1 with 2014 SP1, support for Windows 8.0 was discontinued after 2015. Windows 7 SP1 64-bit, which is pretty much what everybody's running out there nowadays. It's pretty much the standard. SOLIDWORKS has had support for it for a while and is continuing to keep support on it. Your 32-bit Windows installations, the latest version that they can use is SOLIDWORKS 2014. Hopefully nobody's running Windows XP out there anymore, but I think that was back in 2012 when they phased out Windows XP. Some of these SOLIDWORKS will say, I will not install on Windows 8.0 with SOLIDWORKS 2016, whereas some of the others, they will attempt and complete an installation like Windows 10 with SOLIDWORKS 2014, but you might run into some issues with that installation and notice some issues since they don't officially support running that software on that operating system. Probably the next most important thing for performance considerations is making sure that you have a supported graphics card. And I've got highlighted here the NVIDIA Quadro and the AMD FirePro is what we see the standards in the industry right now as. It's not so much how good of an NVIDIA Quadro card or how good of an AMD FirePro card do I have, but making sure that I have a card that is on the list of SOLIDWORKS certified graphics cards. So in my customer portal here, under system requirements, we do have information for each of those operating systems as well as some of the hardware specs. There's a link to the certified graphics drivers. You can select the computer model that you're using right now or a computer model that maybe you're shopping for and looking at and step through the graphics card options that are available on it. We see a lot of people running the precision laptops that Dell makes. Or you can switch to any vendor if you're just saying, hey, I need to get a new graphics card for this computer. And you can see what graphics cards are supported from that specific manufacturer. Most of your NVIDIA Quadro cards are going to hit this list, with the M series being their newest cards, the K series is last year's cards, and then the standard Quadros are, I think, 2 years ago. So making sure you have a certified graphics card that is on this list and it's supported for the version and operating system that you're running is important. As important as making sure that you have enough RAM and a good processor. And so with those two computer specs, those are the ones that are going to bottleneck for us in SOLIDWORKS. With the RAM, SOLIDWORKS recommends 8 gigs of RAM on any workstations running SOLIDWORKS. We typically recommend go ahead and shifting up to 16 gigs. I know in our training room, we were running 8 gigs on each of those workstations for a while, and even just doing some simple training files, no crazy multitasking or heavy workflow that you would get in probably your everyday basis. But we did go ahead and upgrade those to 16 gigs, and that 8 gig to 16 gig jump with RAM really is very noticeable. More noticeable than the 16 gig to 32 gig jump. But if you are working with a lot of large assemblies, that is a RAM intensive task. If you're doing a lot of multitasking, that is a RAM intensive task, and you probably will notice a difference going from 16 gigs to 32 gigs if either of those describes the kind of work that you do. Now for the processor, we typically think that the processor is 100% the most important thing. SOLIDWORKS usually is more RAM intensive. The processor really comes into effect if the processor speed if you're running simulations or renderings, because those are processor intensive tasks, and the sky's the limit. The more the better when it comes to the processor running processor intensive tasks like simulations or photo renderings. There's really not a stopping point for how much processor is enough. So the most you can get. Something in the software when it comes to performance to consider is the performance evaluation tool in SOLIDWORKS parts. I've got a assembly here we'll take a look at. On the part level, the performance evaluation tool can be found on the Evaluate tab, and it tells you your rebuild times based off of each feature. And so I can tell here that Extrude 5 is contributing 20% of the rebuild time on this model. Something you might consider is if you have lots of fillets at the end of the model, but you're still doing work on other areas, you can use the rollback bar to roll back some of those fillets at the end, some of the things that aren't going to affect your workflow, especially if they're listed as some of the top features in your performance evaluation rebuild time. But another tool that I don't know if as many people use it as use a rollback bar is the freeze bar, and it's similar to the rollback bar. You turn it on in your options, and it's typically off by default. It's this yellow bar here that you can actually pull forward in the model. And I know that Cut Extrude 5 is the feature that's taken the longest rebuild times. And so if I freeze that, of course I'm not going to be able to make any edits to it, but every time I rebuild my part, it's not going to have to rebuild these features. So it's going to freeze those features and essentially free up the RAM and the processor that is being taken up when those features are rebuilt. So that's something that's handy to use, the freeze bar, if you've kind of moved on from the top features in your model, and you can essentially freeze those and continue working without having to rebuild those every time a new feature is created or the assembly is rebuilt, the parts rebuilt. Now you do have some performance evaluation tools on the assembly level that we want to take a look at. So that same performance evaluation tool looks totally different on the assembly level. It gives you some sets of warnings, bring some things to your attention that could affect performance. Right now I've got 5 things listed. A couple of them are green check marks, and a couple of the others are just warnings and notifications. And then it does a full breakdown on the statistics of your assembly, how many parts are in it, those kind of things, how deep the subassembly levels go, how many mates are in the assembly. Anything that appears here in this window, SOLIDWORKS has some great help documentation to explain those and how to address those. One of the things that I see is all my files are on a network drive, and I put them there on purpose just to show you this, but when you're running parts or assemblies off of a network, it has to continually communicate for those read-write operations. So we typically recommend trying to stay off of working on files that are on the network. Either pull them to your hard drive to work on them, or we do have data management software, SOLIDWORKS PDM, that actually keeps a local copy on each client's workstation as they use them without removing it off of the server. That's kind of, in a nutshell, how SOLIDWORKS PDM handles network performance issues. But what it has a server copy, and then when you check it out to work on it, it creates you a local copy that you're just working on your computer. Nobody else can make edits to the network copy while it's there, but they can still see it and open it as read-only. And then when you check it in, it puts a copy of your local copy onto the network as a version. It has full version history capabilities and permissions options as well, but it really does help to address network performance issues, SOLIDWORKS PDM. I mentioned the help file for those assembly performance evaluation notifications. You can actually access SOLIDWORKS help here in your help search box, and putting in performance evaluation, will send me straight to that SOLIDWORKS help website, and I see they've got a performance evaluation page in their large assembly performance section. On that performance evaluation page, it does walk through each of those statistics that can be reported and the diagnostic tests that can pop up as warnings. So if you see that in this model I have in context circular references on these parts, let's go over to the help document and say, what is an in context circular reference? And it gives you some information there. Some of the other ones actually will go into detail and show you how to address those problems. SOLIDWORKS help, performance evaluations, those are some of the great resources we have working with performance in the software itself. Also on the assembly level, you have assembly visualization, where you can list the components by order of mass or quantity, any other custom properties. One of the things that is tucked away deep in here is being able to sort your parts by graphics triangles. And so sorting by graphics triangles, I can see which parts are the most graphics intensive. And I can open the parts from there. One of the things you can check is, well, this is an imported part. And this is imported parts can especially be a hindrance in this area, that they have a lot of faces and facets that are cumbersome for the system to generate. One of the tools that can directly control that is the image quality. So you see I've got the image quality set up pretty high. If I lower the image quality too far, my circles aren't going to look like circles. But if this is a purchased part, that might be acceptable for you. You just have to adjust that as whatever is acceptable for you with the image quality. Make sure you're definitely not in the red. And this is a document setting that's per file. It's file specific. If you have your template set up with really high image quality, then every part you create, and maybe if you got one guy that every part he creates is a really big file size, might want to look at that on the templates that he's using in there. So we see that the battery drops significantly from the top component with around 8,000 graphics triangles. We cut that about in a fourth. And that's going to really help as the assembly is displayed. We notice the swivel is not an imported part, but it does have that same issue with the graphics triangles. I've got that turned up kind of high. We might turn that down there on that one. And it isn't even the complexity or the size of the part. We'll see that one of the other components is this miniature bulb here that has a lot of graphics triangles, and that is an imported part. And I actually went ahead, just so you'd see it, went ahead and turned that image quality all the way up as high as it would go. And so even small, relatively simple parts, if the settings aren't right on them, can be cumbersome for the system to generate. So that's assembly visualization with graphics triangles. On the Evaluate tab, Assembly Visualization, and then you'll have to add a tab column in for graphics triangles, and then you can sort your assembly by that. Working with large assemblies, there are a few modes that you can work in. You can open a part in lightweight mode. You can create speed packs. Don't actually generate the geometry. It just shows the graphics in those areas and leaves you with the faces and edges that you want to use in the assembly to mate to. You can set up those speed packs on subassemblies. There is a large assembly mode and a large design review modes. To access those, when you open a file, you do have, we'll filter to the top level assemblies. You do have the options for what mode you'd like to open that in. As well as what configuration or display state you'd like to open it in, and if you want to use speed packs for those. There's more information on that on SOLIDWORKS help website. We were at the performance evaluation page earlier. backing up from that, there's a whole section on improving large assembly performance with a few of those mode options and even some design considerations for working with large assemblies. So great assets there, and you can either access it through help.solidworks.com or directly in SOLIDWORKS through the help search. The last thing I wanted to highlight was some troubleshooting options if you are having crashing issues or problems with your machines and you want to get us involved or get SOLIDWORKS involved, and we'll find out what's going on with it with you. The first thing you should do is go ahead and launch SOLIDWORKS RX, and that's available in the Start menu under SOLIDWORKS Tools, and I'm just searching my Start menu here for SOLIDWORKS RX 2016. You can also launch it from within SOLIDWORKS on the Home tab. Once you have it launched, you have access to a couple safe modes that SOLIDWORKS can boot into. OpenGL mode to bypass the graphics cards to address graphics issues. And then you can actually temporarily disable your tools and options customizations to say, hey, is it a setting that I have changed that is affecting the way SOLIDWORKS is acting? So you can temporarily bypass the tools and options settings to launch SOLIDWORKS with default settings, and then if that addresses your issue, you might come in here and either reset your settings for a certain page or for all your options, or go into the knowledge base. There is a knowledge base solution for forcing SOLIDWORKS to behave like a clean install and regenerate all the registry entries. The Diagnostics tab will tell you if your graphics card driver is supported, the specific driver that you have installed. This link goes to the page that we were at earlier with the graphics card drivers, and you can look for the specific model or the specific video card that you're running and say, is it supported for SOLIDWORKS 2016 on Windows 10? And if this was the case for me, I would want to launch this driver here. So I do have the K4000 card, and the driver is the 35456, and it's supported and up to date. If it was not supported or up to date and there was a supported card driver available, they can actually give you a link here that you click on for a direct download. So the first thing you want to do, SOLIDWORKS behaving weird, check your graphics card drivers here in the Diagnostics tab. And then if you're still having issues, do a problem capture. You'll let this load so it can gather the logs for the previous SOLIDWORKS session, and you can send that as a zip file to us to have a look at your system settings as well as the last logs that were recorded in SOLIDWORKS. But if it's a reproducible problem that you can take a video of and record, SOLIDWORKS has a tool called Problem Capture that you click here, Start Capture. It will launch SOLIDWORKS for you. You open the files, start a recording, and make SOLIDWORKS crash or behave weirdly, whatever it's doing. Once you finalize the video, it will package the logs with the AVI video for us, and in step 3 you can enter some details on the issues you're having and send all that either as a zip file, or if it's too large to send, we can give you a Dropbox link and we can take a look at that with you. Typically when we push an issue over to SOLIDWORKS tech support, when it gets over our heads, this is where they want to start with a SOLIDWORKS RX zip file and a video of reproducing the issue if possible. That's a brief look there at the SOLIDWORKS RX tool. A couple other troubleshooting features to wrap up the webinar that we have in the customer portal is the knowledge base, where you can look up specific error messages or issues that you're having, as well as the CAD admin dashboard. And so when SOLIDWORKS RX is ran on a client on a user's computer, that information gets pushed back to SOLIDWORKS if they have their customer improvement program turned on, and that information is accessible to the CAD admin through the customer portal. You can set up a system options benchmark and compare your user's settings to that to see what default templates they're using, dismiss messages, what settings they have set up in their SOLIDWORKS that differ from your baseline. You can see session history when they had crashes on their machine. So if you've got a user that is having several crashes, make sure they have that performance log on, and you can actually see how many times they closed SOLIDWORKS successfully versus how many times it crashed. You can see all their hardware configuration. So this is the different computers that we have activated on our serial number. And all this is connected by the serial number, what graphics card they have, and the drivers they're running. SOLIDWORKS will flag you if the graphics drivers are not up to date. So right here on a couple of the machines here, it looks like one of our machines does have unsupported graphics drivers. So this is great information for a CAD admin that's managing several users and their computers at once. So those tools in the customer portal, the CAD admin dashboard, and the SOLIDWORKS knowledge base. So that's SOLIDWORKS best practices, walking through looking at some tips for installations. Make sure you do disable your antivirus, run as admin. Performance issues, working with your hardware and using the tools that are built into the software to make sure you're performing up to par. And some troubleshooting help using the SOLIDWORKS RX tool and those tools we have available in the customer portal. This PowerPoint presentation is at that shortened Google link there, go.gl/PDBRES, and we'll have that available for a few more days, so you can go ahead and download that PowerPoint if you want the notes from this presentation. Thank y'all for joining us.